Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first of its kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody, Mark and Steve, the PBSE podcast. This is, I need to go back and look at my list. I didn't know which one this was. It's a podcast. Oh, it's 233, episode 233.
It's a good problem to have to go back and look which episode we're doing.
I can't count that high.
Awesome. It all stops at 232. That's the max brain capacity.
That's right. This is 233. So we've broken through a barrier in our brains. But this comes from a partner. And as always, our hearts really go out to all the partners that we work with, talk to, share with, everything that have been through and go through with betrayal trauma and all of the horrible things that you never asked for, you don't deserve, you didn't anticipate in many cases, you can't fix. I mean, it's just our hearts just go out in so many ways to you partners. And of course, we're addicts in recovery. And so we have a tremendous place for all of you addicts in recovery or wanting to get in recovery. We certainly feel for you as well. But let me read real quick what this partner sent in to us, because we could really relate to this with the work we've done with partners and couples over so many years. She says, "Hi, Mark and Steve. I'm feeling a lot of apathy in my marriage, and I don't understand the point in staying. I've been with my husband for 2 years and married for less than 6 months. We've been separated for 2 weeks now because he keeps relapsing on porn. I have been previously married, and I initiated the divorce when I realized that I was in extremely psychologically abusive relationship, marriage. My current husband has a pattern," and then she kind of describes this pattern. "They have a disclosure day where he comes clean with all of his addiction behaviors. Then there's a honeymoon period where he makes changes and he has all these awesome epiphanies. And then within a couple of weeks, he slides backwards, and then he is shocked when he relapses again." Now she says, "Now this time around, it looks like he's throwing himself into recovery. He's going to 12-step meetings. He's in therapy. He's got a daily accountability partner. He's journaling. He's meeting with their ecclesiastical leader." But then she says very vulnerably in Raleigh, "But I just don't believe in any of it. I'm waiting for the same old cycle to repeat itself." So then she says about herself, "I go to my own support groups. And when I go there, I listen to these sad women, and the whole time I'm thinking, why are we all putting up with this? Why are we risking our well-being for the slim chance that our addict spouses will change decades of ingrained behavior?" And then she says, I want to leave. I know life can go on after divorce. I know I'll be okay. I currently stay because God has told me to give it more time. But I'm not interested in being another woman whose spouse is still relapsing years later. Could you guys please tell us spouses what's the point in staying? What is there to be gained for us?
Hmm. Well, I'll make a deal with everyone listening to the podcast. This is going to be a rougher discussion here for a few minutes, but we can end with a perspective of hope based on Mark and I's marriage and navigating through it. Is that fair?
Yep.
We'll do that. We're
Well,
just going to preface it with some good.
and it's really was very timely that her question came up in the rotation, because you all know we're about 2.5 months behind on questions, so we get to them when we can. But it's interesting that her question came up in our rotation and when we could get to it, right in concert with a session that we held this morning in our Dare to Connect program with all of the addicts in recovery. And what was one of the things that came up? We are talking in Dare to Connect right now about boundaries, healthy boundaries, how to set them, what outcomes or consequences look like when they're violated. And one of the things that came up today with the addicts was, why do we set boundaries? We set boundaries, hopefully, from an authentic space that says, here's what I want and here's what I need. And here are the healthy boundaries that I'm going to set on my side of the street for those wants and needs to be met. Not as a way to control my partner or punish my partner or, try to guarantee outcomes. I'm going to set boundaries based on my healthy wants and needs and being authentic and whole coming from that space. And as we talked about that in the addict session today in Dare to Connect, one of the things that became really clear was that we live in a culture, really a world, really, where we're not very good at really getting to the deep, deep down, peeling back the layers of what I really want and need in this relationship. A lot of times I don't even know what those wants and needs are, frankly, because I've never explored them or really looked at them in any depth. So what do we end up doing in our culture? We end up, and I'm going to say legitimately, from a legitimate place of extreme pain, extreme betrayal, extreme trauma, I end up kind of lashing out in the only way I know how to scream out that my needs and wants aren't being met. And so I ask questions like, why do I stay? Why do we put up with all this crap? What is in it? What is in all this for us as partners? Will you guys please answer that?
Mm.
And what I hear in those expressions is what, Steve, you and I hear so often is there are some really deep, deep things coming through her questions here that are way deeper than what she's asking.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so important for us to realize that we live in a culture where we ask a lot of these reactive, painful, very passion-driven questions, but are they the right questions? Are they the deep questions? Or, as we talked about in D2C today, is that really authentic to you guys or to your partners? Are you really asking what you mean? I guess that's what I'm trying to say today in the beginning of this podcast. Do we say what we mean? And do we even know what we mean? Do we ever actually get there to a place of deep integrity? When I say integrity, from my integrated, connected, authentic, true, whole self, can I really say and ask for what I'm really trying to express? Or do I just go to these reactive surface places because I don't know what else to say? Why am I still here, damn it?
Yeah.
Well, that's legitimate, but what's deep under it? What are you really authentically wanting to ask and express? Right.
Well, and there's a couple of things to be said about that, right? There's definitely the pros and the cons, and we're going to talk about those in a second. But something that's just coming to mind, honestly, even outside of us getting ready to produce this, as we're just talking, is an awareness, I think, or a lack thereof, that so many of us oftentimes have around I don't know if this is the right word, but maybe the insecurities that we carry around rejection.
Yes.
And the potential for and the other things that could come with if it doesn't work out. Even as our brain on the one hand is saying, hey, we need to look at this as an option, not necessarily that we need to end this per se, but we need to start entertaining this because this is getting serious and I don't know how long we can go. Right. Sometimes I think almost in a subconscious way, I definitely would say we addicts do this. And I'd imagine partners do in many cases. In fact, I know they do, having worked with a lot now that I think about it. A lot of partners do that as well. Even as there's that part of us, we will consider to a degree, sometimes even the pros and the cons. But do we really take a look at like those emotional, again, I guess I'll use the term insecurities, right? Around, for example, a lot of a big deal with some of the cultures that Mark and I, or in our culture, I guess you could say just in general, is there's a real societal cultural value to being quote unquote attached to someone.
Sure.
Right. Just being attached to someone, and the idea, and I have worked with partners. In fact, I'm thinking of one in particular right now, where when we started to really look at why she was staying, a shocking amount of the reason why was tied up in that very thing. Right. It wasn't even so much a desire to stay as it was more of a fear of going back to quote unquote singlehood. Right.
Going back to singlehood. Yeah.
So anyway, just something to consider as we jump into these other
something
parts.
Something came up in the Dare to Connect session this morning. And you were talking about, Steve, this morning about the rules behind healthy boundary setting. And one of the things that came up in how we set boundaries is, do we understand what it means to really be authentic? Like, am I being true to my own true inner needs, wants, desires? Am I an integrated person, a connected person, or do I go along to get along? Or do I walk on eggshells? Or do I get really angry and lash out because I'm not getting those needs or wants met? And what I realized as we talked in the D2C session this morning was, I learned in the family and the religious culture, the peer culture, the family culture I grew up in, it was a very risky and dangerous thing to get in tune with my own true wants and needs. That was the first hard thing, because I was taught, you don't have any. You're just part of this enmeshed group. So how dare you express your selfish individual wants and needs? So shut up, right, to begin with. So I didn't even try to explore those. But let's say that I did explore my true authentic wants and needs. God forbid that I would actually take the risk to express them, right? Because that was downright dangerous.
Yeah, putting yourself out there in a really unsafe way.
You get pounced on fast, right? Because the adults around me had their own crazy, dysfunctional challenges and mental illness and everything else. So how dare you as a child start to express that you might actually have wants and needs? Yeah. So it's dangerous to do so. So I find that what do we do instead? We become very reactive when those needs and wants are not being met. And we start asking questions like this partner very legitimately sent in. Why am I here? What is this even about? Right? Why do we keep putting up with this crap? And but what's under those really legitimate questions? Are there deeper layers and levels to peel back through to get to what you're really, really wanting to express deep down?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and this partner, in her submission, what I'm going to say next may not apply as much to her, but I know it applies to many partners that are listening, kind of going back to that insecurity or that fear piece. She talks in her submission about how, financially, I don't feel like I need to stay. Emotionally, I feel like I can stand on my own 2 feet. I've done this before in relationships, and it's not my first rodeo when it comes to this betrayal piece. And
there's life after divorce. I know I'll be okay.
Absolutely. Well, but I know for a fact that a lot of spouses don't feel that way. And there's a really tangible fear around that, and children only complicate that, right? And we're going to talk about the pros and the cons here in just a second. But if you're going to get into this next state of really leaning into those questions, rather than allowing the desperation of the situation to box a partner into that place, because we have had partners, we're not saying that this partner who wrote this in did this, but we have had partners who come to us and they're literally just looking at us. They're saying, why should I stay? But I think really the question is give me a reason not to go.
You guys need to give me a reason not to go.
Right. And that's another way of phrasing the same thing, but there is a different connotation.
And what do you hear in that? What the thing, Steve, that I think saddens your heart and mind when we hear that from a partner, it's a very legitimate expression. It comes out of exhaustion. It comes out of being betrayed over and over. It comes from the addict going back into the same cycle over and over and over. You hear hopelessness. You hear all the optimism is gone. But what do we hear mostly? We hear a partner that has completely stepped out of their own power.
Yes,
They're
totally.
in a completely disempowered box where they just feel like they have no options, and they're asking you to decide for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in this boundaries piece, we were talking to the partners last week in the partner session, and as I do sometimes in Dare to Connect, and occasionally on the podcast, although there's not usually time here, I can get kind of, would you say, Mark, forceful? Healthily forceful.
Passionate.
Good way. Passion. There you go. Passion. That's a great way to put it. Right. And because this kind of came up, this desperation piece came up for some partners, and we had a really good discussion that kind of started off with the following. And I hope that each of you hears it for how we intended it to our D2C subscribers. You as a partner, and also you as an addict, for any addicts listening, everyone in a relationship has both the right, but also the obligation. And I don't think we think about it in that way, but we need to. The right and the obligation to ask sincerely the questions that she is saying, whether it's coming from a disempowered place or not.
I agree.
Should I stay or should I go? Right. And to really lean into those questions. And rather than if your brain is telling you that and you're feeling those if you don't have the option to leave a relationship, and that truly is not an option for you, guess what that does to your ability to choose it? We've done podcasts on this before. If I truly can't leave a relationship, to whatever degree I feel like I can't leave, is also the degree to which I'm not really choosing it either.
Right.
Because I'm stuck.
Right.
And I don't think I haven't talked to an authentic person on planet Earth who, when they connected with their true authentic self underneath all the other thinking errors and deficits, who wanted to either stay in a relationship where they didn't want to stay, or they wanted a partner to stay in a relationship where they didn't really want to stay.
Right.
Right. I love my wife more than anything. And if she wanted to end our relationship, it would be horrible. And there'd be lots of talks about examining why, and is this really what we're doing? And are you sure? And are there authentic changes I can make? Right. There'd be a whole dialogue about that, and it'd be awful. But at the end of the day, if Brittany were truly unhappy with me and just was in her heart of hearts, it was like, I can't find happiness here, I wouldn't want her to stay.
No.
That would be miserable. I don't want to be a prisoner.
Well, and you and I talked about something really important, Steve, and I think this is for both partners listening and for addicts listening. We will, Steve and I will say passionately till the day that we leave this planet, please, please, please do not make critical life decisions from a disempowered place. Don't make critical decisions from a reactive place, from a I have no choice place, from a I'm so emotionally compromised, I can't think straight. Please don't make decisions from any of that space. And so what do we always encourage all of you to do? Can you each, as an individual partner, an individual addict in recovery, can you do your own personal work, tap into your own personal support system, get yourself into as authentic and sincere a place of personal change as you can, and then come together to talk about these hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I still here? Why am I allowing you to put me through this? I'm afraid that what appears to be sincere recovery on your part is you're going to follow your old pattern in history, and you're just going to go back into the old, trough of addiction. Here we are in the roller coaster ride. That's what I really fear here, because it's happened so many times. So why am I still sitting here?
Yeah.
Right now, you can't come and have that discussion from a reactionary, angry, completely victimized, hopeless, whatever space.
Or trapped place.
Or a trapped place, but to come from as healthy a place as you can and say, can we really, really talk about this in as heartfelt and authentic and genuine a space as possible? It's hard. It's crazy hard to ask these questions, but can we kind of sit in with each other and really just talk about it from as much authenticity as we can?
Yes.
I don't know if this partner who wrote us has had that kind of a discussion with her addict partner.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of takes us to the how, right? How do we do this? And I like how Mark put this in our notes today. How do we actually look at this? Do we keep pursuing the same old,
Yeah, the same old approach.
or do we choose a different one? Right. And so we do. I mean, this isn't the only step. Like I said, we're giving multiple tips here today and guidance, but there does at some point in time need to be a literal pros and cons list. Right?
An A/B list, a pros and cons list, right? Here's the list if I stay. Here's the list if I go.
And you need to break that up into specific categories. From an emotional standpoint, for example, what are the pros of staying in this relationship? Because there are real pros of being attached to someone.
Yeah.
But what are the cons?
Yeah.
Of being attached to this person?
Yeah.
Right. And which outweighs the other? From an attachment perspective, now some people would be confused by that. Emotional attachment, they seem the same, but they're not, because there are a lot of tangible, for example, temporal benefits to being in a relationship, ranging from financial to division of labor to all sorts of things. You need to think about all those things if you're going to really be authentic about a decision like this, right? So from an attachment place, financially speaking, kind of similar to the last one that I just listed, right? There are real pros and cons to remaining. From a children perspective, it's no secret that when it comes to really hard questions like this, children epically complicate the scenario. But we know that many of you are facing that, and that needs to be looked at, right, from a realistic point of view. And there are many others too, but there needs to be a sit down and a consideration of these. And I think that even as I think about it, as I've done these pros and cons lists with spouses over the years, there are kind of multiple benefits. One is actually the academic exercise, right, of looking at these things. And that's important to get in touch with your authenticity. But the other part really kind of ties in with what I mentioned earlier. For some of us, I think that the thought of divorce or becoming detached, or in my case, because I have real serious abandonment issues that I work on from my childhood, right? That's been something I've worked on for a long time. Being abandoned, sometimes our feelings around those are so great that it keeps us from even looking at those as options, right? I'll never forget the day Brittany and I really had a real conversation. It was right after a Jerry Springer-like fight in our house where I kid you not, our front door was open at about 2 a.m. Half my clothes were ripped off their hangers in the back of my truck. The door was hanging out open for any neighbors that happened to be out at 2 a.m. Brittany's crying on the couch, and I'm sitting next to her crying next to her too, because we finally just somebody said out loud, it was me, that, gosh, I don't know if we're making it to Christmas. We'd never actually put dates to it before. Right? Nobody, I think the fear is that if somebody says it, then it makes it more real. Right? But we had to look at that and say, look, this is really where this is trending. Is that what we want? And I think that has to happen individually as well. Right? And making a pros and cons list, I think, can help a person who struggles with that codependency or those abandonment issues or whatever it may be that gets in the way of your authenticity. Actually making lists like this helps a person to emotionally acclimate to actually the idea of what this could look like.
And then coming together to share that pros and cons list with each other.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Huge.
If safe to do so.
If yes. And how you share has all to do with the safety. So if the safety is not there and it's a very risky, dangerous thing, then that the pros and cons list can still be shared, but maybe it's shared by email. Maybe it's shared through a written letter, right? Instead of face to face. Sure. Steve, one of the things that came up, and as we finish up today with the podcast, there was one thing that really hit me hard. And I thought of my own wife in regard to this, and I've seen a lot of partners. It's the whole question. I know it's a cliche question that is asked a lot, but too often not deeply delved into. What is authentic? What is authentic for me, for example, as a partner? And I'll tell you how this applied to my wife. My wife's authentic self, I call her the unsinkable Molly Brown. She's crazy optimistic. She's crazy hopeful. She sees the good in people and wants to. She's really, it's just her natural self. And so I will tell you one of the reasons why she stayed with me through decades of jackassery, because it was authentic for her to hope. It was authentic for her to see the good in Mark. And she will tell you, people ask her, why did you stay? She says, because I saw the good in him in the midst of all the garbage and the crap. And so for her, staying was authentic because she's a hoper. She's an optimist. She likes to see the good. And so she decided that she was willing to, quote, hang in for some period of time because that was authentic. Now, did she get to the place where it all exceeded her authentic hoping and optimism and seeing the good? It did. And it was the night she finally looked at me in the car and she said, I am not willing to do this anymore. You have now exceeded my capacities to hope and be optimistic and see the good in you. I've reached my limit. That was also authentic to her. And that's when she said, we have 5 sons and I feel like I'm raising 6 boys. I need you to be a man. And that was the night that I considered blowing my own head off with my gun from my gun safe, because that was so shocking to hear her say that. But do you see how the two realities coexisted for her? The optimist, the hoper, the see the good in people, the always lift others up, and the other authentic side that said at the same time,
This has got to change.
you've now exhausted all of those capacities within me, and I'm no longer willing to do it.
Yep.
All of that was authentic for her. And she didn't sit in the car and look at me from a place of being trapped in a box and having no power and no voice and making a decision from that disempowered place. Now I realized that she had done a lot of contemplation, a lot of journaling, a lot of praying, a lot of tapping into her own support system. And when she came to me in the car that night, my wife, the optimist, the see good in people, the lift and love and support others, that woman also came and said, this other authentic side of me says, I'm no longer willing to continue.
Yep. Absolutely.
She came to both, but it was from a place of empowerment that she said it to me, a place of standing in her truth and showing up in her full integrated self that made that honest declaration to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
that's where we want all these partners to come from. If you're going to make these decisions, can you make them from the place I'm describing? Even they're crazy painful or crazy real, but is it still from an empowered place?
yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, well, I promised you we'd end at a positive note, so we'll end on the positive note, right? Mark and I were very fortunate. We had partners who it turned out it was authentic for them to continue to work and to try to work on this marriage. And we were each guys who, despite all of the hard and the rocky and the resistance, we were able to get into that sincere state of consistent change that we've
Yeah, we
talked about
did.
today before things ended. That doesn't mean that everyone ends up that way, because it doesn't. But for those that are able to make it, yes, there are huge rewards to staying if you can authentically do so and work it out. But that does take a partner, right, who is willing to make change, is willing to adapt, and it requires both of your authenticities to be able to match up.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't always happen, but that it just behooves the question of, and the implorement from all of us to the addicts listening and to the partners, to whatever degree that applies to you. If you find yourself in a place of stubbornness or pride, or I'll change later or tomorrow or when they change. We talked about all this stuff in depth in Dare to Connect during our initial boundaries work a couple weeks ago, and we're in the thick of it now. We'd love to have you come join us. But for all those who struggle with that piece, we encourage you to try to explore and figure out that authentic side for you. And if you holding that line is really authentic, or if it's coming from a place that's not authentic, like it did for Mark and I in a lot of ways, because we got really close to that line of our partners having to say, yeah, we're done. So,
well, it did take that for me to get to where I would start to take recovery seriously and do it for myself.
yeah.
And I'm just going to say, thank God that my wife did believe in me all the decades that she believed in me, and I didn't believe in myself. Thank goodness she saw in me what I couldn't see in me. And now I can. And and again, every partner can only do that so long, but she saw in me what I couldn't. And today I see the same thing. and we collaboratively work on it.
Yeah.
We like to say, it takes two to tango when things aren't going well. It takes two to tango when things are going well. And I had to get on board with so many great things that what she could see and what she was doing. It took both of us getting on board for that to work.
Well, guys, thank you very much for being here. Lots more we could do, but we are out of time. This boundary stuff, as you probably are picking up from our last several episodes, because the submissions keep hitting on kind of this area, is a complicated process. We're on kind of month 2 of navigating that really in depth. If you have in-depth questions about boundaries, how to set them, what they look like, how authenticity works, how to navigate these things in a relationship, you can send us questions and get answers at some point when we're able to get to them. Or you can talk to Mark and I Wednesday in the partner session if you'd like, or Friday in the couple session. Come on over and give Dare to Connect a try. DareToConnectNow.com. We do continue to offer a 2-week free trial for that. I'd love to have you guys come and give it a shot. We appreciate everybody always patronizing the podcast. At this point, I just ran the numbers. We're going to hit 1 million downloads before the end of this year.
Yeah.
Which is
amazing,
mind-blowing,
miraculous.
So we so appreciate all of you and your patronage and your support, and always grateful to hear from you, whether it's a question or a thought about how the podcast has helped you. You can send us questions or compliments or criticisms, all the above, at pbsepodcast.com. And to grab a 2-week trial of the Dare to Connect program for addicts, partners, and spouses with over 30 hours a month of content, an ever-growing library of set content, and a new D2C Academy of new advanced courses, as if we didn't already have enough in there. We hope that you'll check that out at daretoconnectnow.com. And other than that, have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for being with us, and we'll pick things up in our next episode.
Bye-bye.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants, and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.